Welcome to our class on media theory and why media and methods matter. Please have completed your reading of Chapter 1 and taken all of the necessary notes to combine with the notes from this lecture. The importance of media theory and methods begins with an understanding of the shifting nature of social relations over the past 200-300 years. Specifically, the difference in communities between pre-modern and the modern era. As a concept, modernity is defined as beginning around the 1830s as a result of the coinciding processes of industrialization, where we built all the factories, urbanization, where the people moved from rural areas to city core, and social democracy, where power shifted from the church and the monarchy into quote-unquote the hands of the people. In this pre-modern era, before all of that happened, what Tony's called Gemeinschaft community was marked by shared social norms and experiences. In this kind of a community, interaction and identity development are based on shared understandings, face-to-face interactions, and traditional social roles. With the advent of urbanization and industrialization and democracy, and frankly even globalization, people and ideas became disconnected from the authority of the church and the monarchy and those social institutions that had wielded power for all of those centuries. Instead, you had the exchanging of ideas, you had competing ideas, you had new ideas, and you had new ways of being, new organizational structures for society. In this new modern community, Gesellschaft, the individual is unbounded from those institutions of traditional rules and left to develop their sense of self from a variety of socializing agencies. In this context, the individual has to determine who they are and what that means from a whole range of socializing agents. People also have these individual roles, these specialized things that they do in society, like being a grocer or a banker or a pastor. And they interact with people based on those roles. For an example, think about in a modern community, instead of interacting with your neighbor because your families have known each other for decades, you interact with your neighbor, or maybe not your neighbor at all, but you interact with people because they can provide a service to you or they require a service of you. So the grocer needs the farmer to make food, the teacher needs the grocer to sell her food, and the farmer and the grocer need the teacher to teach their children. We interact with people based on these individualized, specialized service roles instead of based on old school, sort of shared experiences, collective energy, collective conscience. A mass society of individuals who are not organized by a common social structure like the church or the monarchy or the village then get organized by the media as one component of their development of identity. This notion that the media is a thing that might be controlling people led people to wonder what is it that people are consuming, right? And what impact does that consumption have on them? Early on, people worried all about this highbrow, lowbrow, good culture, bad culture notion. Your book has this wonderful quote by Nietzsche saying that he was worried about the tyranny of the least and the dumbest. You know, in the time since then, theory has moved away from worrying so much about high and low brow, but it does still worry about content. Let's talk about theory more broadly for a second here, okay? Broadly speaking, theory provides the scientists a lens to guide their work. It suggests a series of variables for inspection and some assumptions about how those variables work together. Without a theory, a scientist would have such a wide variety of variables to explain social phenomena that it would be entirely impossible to ever start researching. For example, if as a theorist you wanted to understand why violent crime rose in 2015 after 2 years of decline, you'd have to explore obvious explanations for violent crime like gun availability and cuts to law enforcement. But because you didn't have a theory to guide you, you'd also have to explore every possible variable. So you'd spend time worrying about the height of the general population, or the ratio of urban to rural, or how much corn that community had grown that year. Listen, what theory does is it narrows the universe of possible variables to keep the scientist on track. Mass media theory, at its core, asks a series of questions related to what Wendy Griswold called the cultural diamond, which basically has these 4 points and 6 relationships that are available for study or for theorizing. The points represent what gets said and how it was made, who is saying it, who receiving it, and the context in which it was made. These 4 points and 6 relationships act as a paradigm to guide media theory. It orients the researcher. For example, the political economists who we'll read about in the next chapter, they tend to focus on who gets to produce the cultural objects and the context within which those objects got made. The Frankfurt School instead focuses on what gets said and who receives it. Now, in addition to all of this theory, it's important to remember that the scientific method is the thing that guides the theory, right? So you have the theory and then you ask the empirical questions about whether or not that theory is true. All of your methods should be valid and reliable. Reliable means that your results are unbiased and they can be replicated. So if I take your data, I can come up with the same conclusion. Valid means you measured what you intended to measure. Think of a scale, right? So if a scale tells you that I'm 30 pounds over and over and over again, it's reliable, it gives you the same answer, but it's not valid. The science has these 5 components according to Wimmer and Dominic's seminal 2014 piece. They say it's public, it's objective, it's empirical, it's systematic, and it's predictive. And what that means is that good science is rooted in data like content analysis, statistics, survey, and not in the individual bias of the researcher. It can be used in a multitude of media professions, including market research, program testing, social audits, and advertising analysis. That's it for today. Take some time to review these notes. Do your best to combine them with the notes from your book so that these 2 things serve as a complement to one another. And please take the time to read Chapter 2 and begin working on your mind map before you watch the next lecture. As always, if you have questions or want clarification on any of this material, do not hesitate to call.